And you're recording, right? Great. Okay, cool. So I'm going to do an intro to the podcast. I'm going to intro them. I'll give you that, which means you guys make the noise of 2,000 people. And then I'll explain what we're doing and we'll go. This is the part that's horrible, and I have to remember every time. And I have to get the Filmscape thing up here so I say it correctly. This is what editing's for. And all the people watching it live, the 4 people are seeing this right now, right? Say hi to the 4 people out there.
Hi, guys.
Hey, guys.
Okay. Anyway. Boom. There we go. Hello and welcome back to The Op, the podcast where we talk about operating and the art of visual storytelling. I'm Dave Chameides, your host, and a little bit of a bonus episode today. We are again at I keep on doing this. We are again at Cinecity Studios Chicago, which is very hard to say, at Filmscape, where they're having a little bit of a show here. And we did a podcast yesterday, a live podcast. We're doing another one today. Just so you know where we're at, Filmscape Chicago brings together filmmakers, artists, technicians, and students for networking, education, and training in, and this is the important part, free classes, and on the trade show floor, which is here this weekend and is fantastic. So really excited to be in Chicago. We're doing an operator panel today, and what this is going to be is sort of a rapid fire series of questions about operating, and none of it will be panning and tilting. So if you came, or panning and panning, which is what they call it now, so if you came here for any of that, you're going to be disappointed. But to me, this is the actual part of operating. On our panel is a bunch of amazing local operators. I'm hoping that most of you know them, but for the people who are listening or the 4 people watching at home. Stephanie Dufford recently has worked on Chicago Fire, Chicago Med, and the other, would you say 7 shows that were working in Chicago until recently?
7 of the 9. Yeah.
You guys are the only people in the country working. Next is Seth Thomas, Power and PD, among other things. Great operator. Spencer Gillis, somebody somewhere in Empire, and Gary Malouf is like it's a show called like, what is it? The Bear. That's a TV show, Gary?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. And Justified, which of course everybody knows, but I'd like to hear more about this bear. It sounds interesting. And I'm, as I said, I'm your host, Dave Chameides, and most recently, Chicago-wise, I'm not from Chicago. All these folks are. I did the Chi last year, and actually I was just here last week doing a commercial in Wrigley Field, which apparently is a baseball stadium, and it's kind of cool. So I've done a bunch of stuff in Chicago, and here I am. I'm very excited to be here. I'm going to shut up and ask the first question, and we're just going to go for it. So thank you for being here, and hopefully this is of value. First question, for the people listening at home, am I as good looking? No. Oh, okay. We're not going to go with that one. Okay.
Yes.
Does anyone?
Very good.
Spencer, do you Venmo or cash or what? Okay. Does anyone have resumes anymore? What do you give a new DP or UPM if they're asking to see what you've done? Is it a website? Is it a reel? Is it IMDb? Stephanie?
That's a great question. I was going to ask you guys that.
Ha.
Ooh, sorry.
Wait, you still have to answer the question.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I tell them what I've done. I mean, yeah, I guess I make a resume. I'm actually curious I'm a newer operator than you guys, so I'm curious what you guys
So
do.
the first question is passing. We are off to a great start. Next.
I do turn in a resume and try to stay on top of that one to send off not only to DPs, but line producers, UPMs, people who I tend to know more or first on the job. And I do a fairly decent job of staying current with that. IMDb I used to rely on, but in recent, I certainly have fallen behind on that. I don't even know what my IMDb looks like, so I kind of hope people don't use that as a sort of reference for what I do. But yeah, I mean, the resume is sort of a shot in the dark in hopes of getting an interview, which is where I feel like I stand a better chance of being able to, express myself, say what I've done, and also just show my personality and get that across to a DP or somebody who would hire me. So that's my short answer. Yes, resumes.
Yeah, I would listen to Seth because he's working right now.
Well, that's valuable. Okay.
I use a resume. Yeah, I use a resume. I keep up with the IMDb as well, though, because I feel like, in general, you just sort of know that everybody you work with is going to take 2 seconds to just sort of look you up if you're coming in. Like, especially other operators figuring out who they're going to be working with tomorrow, if there's a day player or something like that. think it's important to kind of have at least some of your greatest hits on there. And yeah, I try to stay up on the resume, although I have to say, doing the resume and like sending that, it seems a little bit like a black hole a lot of the time, where I don't feel like I get much from that, or I don't get a lot of responses. Occasionally I do, but it's pretty rare. It usually is referral-based stuff, you know, other people that you've worked with recommending you is where I usually get jobs.
Yeah, I agree. I panic every time I get asked for a resume because I have to be like, oh man, how out of date is that? And yeah, and I'm also not good at keeping up on my IMDb either. So clearly I'm on top of everything. But yeah, I'm more word of mouth, I think I have the most success in that way, just kind of having people that can vouch for you, basically.
Yeah.
I think is about as, I think it helps people feel comfortable hiring you because somebody they trusts you. I think that helps a lot for me. I usually try to find somebody that knows somebody that knows somebody. The 6 degrees of, yeah, that's usually my play.
That makes sense. I'm a Steadicam operator, so I have it's outdated, and I don't think anybody looks at it, but it is up there. I don't have a resume. I don't think I have a resume. I have IMDb, but I have worked on a lot of things that I think I probably would have enjoyed if I worked on them, so I don't know if that means anything. But usually I'll sort of go, hey, I'll look the person who I'm looking, DP or whatever, I'll look them up on IMDb and cross-reference them and go, oh, I see you worked on such and such, blah, blah, blah. Or if I actually saw it, I'll pull out a shot and just brown nose when I talk to them because it usually helps. But that's kind of where I go. You're up.
I'm up to ask a question. What do you guys like most about being a camera operator?
You stole mine. Should I punt the answer to that one?
And we're
I
done.
sat closer to the front.
What do I like most about operating? I like being in the middle of the room, the most immediate part of the storytelling process when they call rolling. I just like being there, surrounded by the actors. You're on the spot. I enjoy the temporal experience and the physical challenge of it. But yeah, being in the middle of all of it, why we're making films and TV.
This is a tough one.
Yeah.
There's so much to love about operating. I think for me, it's really just that moment between action and cut. You're just so in the moment, and the minute you start thinking is usually when you screw up. So it's a really great challenge mentally to just always sort of be like just living with what's happening in front of you and reacting if something changes, and hopefully you kind of do that gracefully. It's exciting, and there's always not always, but there's often the discovery that kind of happens that can be really electric when that does happen, and you're like, ooh, that was the take for sure, whether that's a performance or just something small that changes, that I live for those moments, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I could say all the normal cliche things that everybody probably says, but I think the one thing that's nice about our job, maybe that's a little bit different from other jobs on set, is that you kind of touch all departments. I think you kind of get to see like a really wide scope, wide view of what the filmmaking creative process is, and you do it with everybody above the line to to PAs. So I think it's just kind of all-encompassing in that way. It keeps it interesting,
The thing that is it for me, which I don't play golf, but I understand that it's akin to golf, is when you actually connect with the ball. Apparently, that's why people still continue to play even when they're bad, because there are moments that you get up and you're 4 feet away from some actor, and they're just giving the performance of a lifetime, and you actually feel like chills, and you're like, I can't believe I get to be the audience for this person. That's to me the best part of it. You can answer.
I think it's just the synthesis of many ideas coming together. It's, artistic expression, it's storytelling, it's a lot of technicality, it's a group effort, and it's nice when it's successful and all of those people come together in a shot.
I guess I'll springboard off of Gary's mentioning of how you're having to deal with all the different departments and all different crafts and what everybody else does, and say which, if any of your responsibilities crosses over into another department's domain. How do you handle that?
Well, I'm glad I'm the first one, because I know the answer is probably going to be set dressing for pretty much everyone. I mean, that's like the obvious
That's
one.
the easy one, yeah.
That's the easy one.
Can you explain why?
I mean, it's, the set dresser is always helping you with your frame, right? There's always these things in the background you want to finagle and tweak to balance your frame out, or whatever it is you're looking to do, or hide like an outlet or a fire extinguisher that you think looks ugly, or whatever it may be. And sometimes, there's one of them and there's a million things that need to get moved, and oftentimes there's 2, sometimes 3 cameras. So sometimes you just have to go and do it yourself, and so it's just important to let them know that you moved it and where you put it or how you shifted it or whatever, just so that for their continuity photos, they know that you've made a shift. That's just how I deal with it, but that's definitely the one that but I usually have a really good relationship with the set dresser, and they kind of know that's how I work, because sometimes you're saving them the trouble, because it's something that it's almost more difficult to spend the time trying to communicate it than it is to just go over and move it that 1/4 of an inch counterclockwise that you need it to be. So.
Yeah, I do. I feel often very terrible for every set dresser I've ever worked with, because their job seems unachievable to me. Everybody's helping me all the time. No one's helping them. So that seems crazy. But I think for me, just with all that stuff, with dealing with other departments like that, it's just like, I'm not an electrician, or I'm not a dolly grip, or I'm not whatever. So like, I do want, they have to have a voice. I think that's the key for me, is that it's just like, they need to be a part of the process, because I'm only going to be as good as they are. So I think just letting them know that, we're in it together, I think to me is the main key for working with other departments. I find that, I get better because I can lean on their expertise, and they help me do my job better, and hopefully I help them have their job be a little easier, maybe, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, I'll set dresser definitely. The weird thing that I find is that because, quote unquote, if I'm on an A camera or even if I'm a B camera, I'm sort of the eyes on the set of what's being shot. There are people with much better monitors that can see stuff that I can't see. So there's that weird thing of going, okay, our actor has a flyaway, and I'm sure someone has seen that, but no one's coming in. Should I say so? Oh, yeah, can we get Hair to come in? And then sometimes they'll be like, oh, thank you. And then someone's like, yeah, I saw it. And you're like, I don't know. I mean, so to me, it's always like redundancy. And I always go, and I'll always say, look, I just wanted to make sure that, you guys have a lot going on. We're understaffed, whatever. But I think it's almost all departments, only because to me, most of my job I find is I'm constantly looking for assassins. I have to call them assassins. It's like that cable over there, or that sandbag, or that flyaway, or that mic, or that mirror, or whatever. And so then I'm, like Gary said, I'm then going to those departments and going, hey, I just want to make sure you're aware of this. And 90% of the time it's like, oh no, we were doing 30 things, thank you for bringing that up. And then 10% of the time it's like, yeah, we got it. And I'm like, and I felt like I showed up in Chicago, and they're like, oh, you're the operator who screws set dressers, okay. But I try to always communicate with them, and they are always overworked, the truth of the matter.
Sure.
So yeah, and actually just on a very specific level, I will actually start a show and immediately introduce myself to as many people as possible. I'll then completely forget their names and apologize because I'm terrible at that. But I'll always say to the set dresser, hey, just so we're on the same page and I know how you work, you seem like you're a single department person here. Like, can I help you? If I always tell you, do you want me, and everybody will be different. Someone will be like, nah, do what you want. And others are like, I don't want you to touch anything, I gotta know. And it's like, okay, then I know, so.
Yeah, I mean, I think the key is communication. Not everyone may be on the same page as you, especially since you're so central to everything that's going on and things change quickly. So, I mean, interacting with other departments is a part of being a camera operator. And anytime I hear about something like, oh, a prop's changing, and my friend who happens to be a prop assistant, I don't think they're aware, I'll just like take a second and let them know. I mean, we're just trying to make art and go home. So I think communication is the key, and just having as good a rapport as you can. You don't have to know everyone really well, but know people's names, or at least like smile and have appreciation, because it's a lot of names.
Yeah, I mean, you guys basically answered my question.
It's hard being last, right?
It is hard being last, but
Well, you were also first, so
true.
it's your
But
fault.
it is
Sweet,
my
Gary.
fault. I assume blame. But totally with what Gary said, I mean, the team spirit element, the collaboration, I think is key. Because, yeah, we have to rely on literally everybody. And to make it clear from the beginning, introducing yourself, I'm terrible with names too, and I'm upfront about that, but just letting people know I respect you, I care about you, I value you, involving them, like Gary said, to be a part of the process. And then, yes, you have assassins working for you, looking in the tiny eyepiece, like you said, where you don't notice a little water bottle in the corner, and then somebody gets it out of the way for you because you've established that sort of vibe. And you can, trust people. We've got gaffers. The gaffer on the show I'm on is here now, and he's always there to fudge something for my frame so I don't have to fight it out, and it just becomes a communal effort, which is always the best environment to work in. So, yeah.
I was going to ask about day playing, which I think when you first start out is usually how you start to kind of just chip away at getting experience and getting to know other operators, or camera assistants for that matter. Just the simple question of like, what's the best way to get asked back as a day player?
When you figure it out, I guess, let me know.
Gary hasn't been asked back in years.
I mean, I think the best thing you can do is honestly just go in there and be yourself and just lean into what you're comfortable, and just be confident, because I think it's kind of like, you're walking into this environment that you may or may not know a lot of people, or you're not familiar with the content or the style or what have you. So I think it's just kind of like leaning into the things you can control, like, can I move this, the things that are just kind of on every set. And I think that once you kind of show that you're competent and that you're part of this, you're helping the process and not holding anyone back, then it's like you're a breath of fresh air, because you're the new person and you're somebody that, is just bringing some fresh blood. So it's like, if you can just be there and be confident, I think that's all people really want, and then the work is either good or bad. That's up to you.
Yeah, as far as the work, do your best. That's definitely the key. But day playing, I would say a couple of things. Number one is I will usually, if I'm assuming it's the first time I've day played on a show, I'll IMDb it and I'll try to figure out who's on it, or maybe I'll even like pull it up on Hulu or something and watch an episode so I understand what they're doing and see who's on it. I'll try to find some people in common. The first thing I do is I'll usually show up a little bit early and I'll find the ACs and go, hey, I'm Dave. I'm assuming if I'm day playing, I'm on B camera or C camera or something like that. And I think the bigger mental thing is you're not there to hit a home run. You're there to basically fill out the team. So even if you have the greatest idea in the world, you know what? It's not your time to shine. You're there to fill in for someone, make sure that the biggest thing is you're there to make sure there's no interruption in the process. So usually I'll go in and I'll go, hey, anything I need to know about framing, the A camera operator or the DP or whoever I meet first, anything I should know about any of the actors, whatever, and then you just sort of sit back and you wait for it and you kind of try to just get in there. And then invariably, the more you work, and I'm sure Chicago is probably even more so because it's a small town, you probably know people, right? So you show up on the set and immediately glom with those people and go, all right, who do I need to know about? And they're like, oh, the AD, blah, 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 blah. Sorry for the ADs out there. But we know it's true.
That's true.
I just lost a job. But yeah, that's what I would say is I think you're there to basically not make a hiccup. I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, I've been doing a lot of day playing lately, and I think and a perk of it is that you're probably the most rested person in the room. And so coming in and just like having gotten good sleep while everybody else there had a forced turnaround, you can just be kind of buoyant, and I tend to be positive, so I like to just bring that energy to a crew that's maybe flagging. And just, the key for me is how to figure out how a show is run and shot is just to be quiet and listen and watch. You don't need to interject. You can find out a lot just by sitting by monitors and seeing how, assuming you're a day player again, you're a B or C cam or whatever, and I think it was H cam at some point. You talk to the DP, to the A op, you watch the A op work, but you just try to help move the day along, and I just find listening is the greatest thing I can bring as a day player.
I think day playing in particular is a place where, it's important to recognize that operating is usually only 20% operating a camera. 80% of it is personality and sensitivity to your surroundings and knowing your place. And like Dave and Stephanie said, it's a more supporting role when you're a day player. In Chicago, which is a smaller town, there's a good chance you know the second ACs or the other operators that called you out. And so that could be to your advantage if a reputation has been pre-established for you. It certainly has for me in the past, where you're sort of set up for success before you show up. Gary covered me recently on a camera on my show, and not that I needed to, but I sold him hard to the DP and made sure he knew he was going to be taken care of. And it definitely eased a lot of minds and set Gary up for a slightly easier day, even though, of course, I wasn't worried. But
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for not telling me that.
yeah, but paying attention, you know, if you're the day player, whether you know people or not, always being there, listening, and knowing when the DP or anybody else turns around and says, let's get that other camera in there, and you already know where you need to be or have a good idea, it's worth your weight in gold, just so they don't have to worry about something else.
I just want to throw something in there because you brought it up, because like when you said day playing, I immediately went to like B camera, C camera, whatever. But the reality is sometimes you do come in for the A camera operator.
Yeah.
And when that happens, I think really what you're doing, in the larger sense of the word, is you're trying to make everything go as smoothly as possible, as if that person had not left. You're not trying to definitely overshadow them, so that they can take other days off, because if it goes spiraling out of control, then it's like, dude, I don't care that your daughter's being christened, you're not taking the day off.
Yeah.
Whereas if it's like, yeah, that worked great, you want to take Friday off, great.
Yes.
And then eventually it's my show, and that's the
For sure.
start. But yeah, I think it's worth mentioning.
Yeah, and when you're covering A, I mean, you try to get a conversation, if you can, with the A operator, especially if it's a show you've never been on before. So you just sort of get the nuts and bolts of like, what are the things I need to look out for? What are the politics that might be of the moment that's like the culture of the set that's happening right now, just to walk in so you're not like completely blindsided. But just in general for day playing, I mean, everybody's pretty much covered it, but I think for me, like, I think just in terms of paying attention, just specifically, I'm really a fan of being at the monitors, paying attention to not only what the coverage has been so far, so that if they're like, oh yeah, like let's put C camera in on a you know, whatever, 100 mil, and you're doing this really tight close up, and you've also been watching the acting, and you know the blocking of the scene, you know sort of how somebody stands up and like what line they're standing up on. So I'm wearing a Comtech, and I'm watching the monitors when I'm day playing, when I'm not shooting, so that I kind of know, and I've sort of memorized the scene already, which is kind of a huge advantage. It's sort of like what you're doing when you're on a camera and you're doing the wide first, hopefully, and you get a chance to sort of memorize the scene and memorize the blocking, and it often shifts and changes, so that by the time you get into the coverage, it's like you have it down. You know where everybody's going, you know how everybody sits and stands, and all that sort of stuff. I think that helps you a lot, so that when you walk in, like Dave was saying, you're not just sort of flying blind, like, oh, what am I doing? Where's the camera going? How does the actor move? They want you to be ready, yeah.
I guess going off of that discussion is like, what happens when you get to a show and you're working with people, you know, as a day player that you don't know, and you're having a hard time with them, whether it's a first or a dolly grip or whoever, actors, just how do you approach, you know, working with people that you're meeting for the first time, and now you have to execute with them as well, and you don't speak maybe the same language. So how do you guys handle that?
Yeah, that does happen. It's just you come in and either maybe someone doesn't want you there because they're used to someone else. And actually, I've been in the situation where I've gone in and to cover someone, and an assistant literally has said, I don't know why I didn't just bump up for the day. And I'm like, oh, this is going to be a fun day. But I think what you do is you number one, you just try everything you can to kill them with kindness. And I think the bigger thing is to empathize with them, to go, okay, I don't know what's going on with you, and reality is I'm here for a day, so I'm not going to find out what's going on with you, but just trying to sort of involve them as much as possible, or not involve them if they don't want to be. I mean, figure out very quickly. And the reality is sometimes, let's say I know the C camera, I'm coming on B, and I know the C camera operator, I might go and after an hour or two and go, am I imagining this, or is this happening? It's like, no, that dude's angry all the time. And it's like, okay, so there's nothing I should do. Or they might go, you know, he's going through a bad divorce. It's just not going to, like, just bear with him. We're all doing, you know. So I would just do some research. But I think, especially when you're day playing, I think the big thing is you realize it's just not all going to be perfect in the way you want, and you have to adapt to it rather than trying to adapt it to you.
Yeah, that was what I was going to say. You have to be adaptable. I mean, if you're not getting along with someone and it's affecting your shot, that's a bigger concern than if you're just not getting along with someone and they're making your day harder than it needed to be. So different avenues to take depending on who it is that you're having friction with. But, it happens. I almost wore a hat today that said can't please them all, because you can't. And you do your best and you stick to your guns and be respectful. And, personally, I just get quiet and kind of just step back and just, kind of let it be. And then, full time, it's a whole different matter. But day playing, it's like, okay, well, this person made me miserable for a day. Oh, well, I still got paid.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really tough question to answer. It's so situationally specific, too. I mean, there are all those tricks that everybody's mentioned so far, but I think it's also important to realize that some days are just going to suck more than others. And, try as you might to use all the tools in your bag to get through it or kill them with kindness or anything, that you might just have a C- day at best, and try not to let it mess with your head too much, and get through it. I mean, that's the honest reality of it. But thankfully, that doesn't happen too often.
Yeah.
This year.
Yeah, I don't know if I have a whole lot to add, except for that I think a lot of times that when that happens, oftentimes it's happening because the person you're working with maybe is not feeling totally like they're in the position that they are to succeed. So like if a dolly grip is being bumped to dolly grip and they kind of weren't really ready for it, or they don't feel like they're ready for it. And so they sometimes will sort of act out, I guess, because they feel a little like they're under pressure. And in those cases, I feel like it's just really important to like make sure that they know you have their back and you're going to like eat it. If something goes wrong, you're not going to throw them under the bus, and you're going to be like, I've got you, don't worry. And just trying to stay calm if something does go wrong, or if something doesn't go the way you wanted it to, just turning back and quietly addressing it and figuring it out together and making sure that they understand that you're on their team and it's like you're all part of a unit and you're all looking to achieve the same goal. I think that's super important.
Yeah, I mean, you are kind of at the mercy of it, I think, too, so it is just, you have to be adaptable and just kind of make it work in the moment. But for me, I think my kind of, where I kind of idle, I think, in that position is to just try your very best to keep your cool. You can't get frustrated. You can't, you have to make sure that it's like, oh, we were a little late on that. It's like, it's never a big deal, even if you're getting screamed at in the headset. Like, nobody needs to hear that part of it because that stuff spirals and snowballs quick. So I think just part of being like, even though you're, maybe in a little bit, like in a C camera or whatever position, like you still have to be a good leader for the people that you're with. So I think that's really the key, is just just making sure that it's like, we'll fix it. It's okay. We don't have to panic.
Right, totally.
I guess is my question. Because you mentioned the head game, do you still get nervous when you go on a new show, a day call, whatever? Do you question yourself while you're working? On your drive home, do you smash the steering wheel in anger because of something you did?
Yeah, I can't wait for you to be answering this question. Yeah, I mean, I'm still fairly new at this, and I'm nervous every day. Yeah, I mean, and I just try to harness it. I've just accepted that that's a part of it, and the more days that I get, the more times I go home being like, okay, I did it. So I think it's lessening. But yeah, I mean, it's a big responsibility, and you want to do a good job, and you want to come back and. So you harness the nervousness and let it make you attentive, or let it make you, have a false cheerfulness or whatever. But yeah, I'm nervous all the time.
I think definitely flight time helps. The more days you put in, the more that subsides. It is harder when you're day playing, especially for somebody you've not worked for before, or day one on a job. The nerves are the strongest then. Or if you happen to know you're going into a situation where the boss is particularly trigger happy, and those reputations precede most of those guys. But you can't say no to every job, and so those are the ones you just try to be more mindful relax into it when you're feeling the nerves and try to just let it pass. But yeah, there is no real, magic trick.
Yeah, I think it's that 80% that Seth was talking about that I still get nervous about. The operating stuff, like the 20% of the actual operating the camera, the more experience you get, the sort of less you really think about that, and that sort of comes more naturally. It's more the 80% of like dealing with the politics and like reading the room and understanding when it's time to say something or when it's time to just keep your mouth shut. And if you're working with new people you've never worked with before and you kind of you look down that call sheet and you're like, oh shit, like I only know the set dresser or something like that, and you're like, oh, this is going to be interesting. That can be really nerve-wracking to walk into. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you don't get nervous, you're a superhero. I don't know how you do that. Yeah, I mean, also, I think that for me, it's just kind of always like walking a fine line of like confidence and fear. Where like I could do it, but like in the back of my head, I'm like, I could totally screw this up, So it's like you kind of just, I think that's my version of harnessing it, where it's like just kind of, if I ride the line, I'll be okay, But I think it's also like goes along with something else that's on here too, which is this imposter syndrome, which is for real, because I mean, yeah, I still think I have so much to learn. So the idea that anybody, to come in with any kind of like, it seems like, to come in with some wild confidence is ridiculous. Like, everything's, you're gonna be challenged. You're gonna get stuff that you've never done before. You're gonna get situations that are new, and that's part of the fun of doing this, for a living is, every day is a little different. Every day there's a new lesson. So I think that it's just lean into that and not worry too much on your ride home about if you should have gave more headroom or whatever is in your head that's going to drive you crazy,
Mm-hmm.
I'm when I start a new job, I'm always nervous. I mean, I've been doing this for a while, but I know that there are shots out there that I won't nail, and there are shots every day that I won't nail, and you start a job and you kind of wonder, what have people heard about me? What are they going to be like? And the reason I brought this up was because I think younger people who are starting are like, oh God, I'm nervous all the time. Everybody's nervous all the time. It's normal. And actually, to what you were saying, Gary, is like, I think that's a health. I think if you're not nervous, you probably should find something else to do, because you clearly think that you're much better than you probably are, and you should challenge yourself. And I think for the most part, and I think acting performances are this way, I think operating, DPing, whatever, the great stuff comes when you're like right on the top of the mountain and you could fall off at any moment, and you're like, I'm gonna just throw this out there and go for it. And that's when the cool stuff happens. As far as harnessing it, and I will say, Gary, I would love it if I could let it go on the drive home, but my drive homes are very ugly. Because I'm constantly, I'll be driving home like listening to some like happy-go-lucky song, and I'm like, God damn it, that's exactly what I should have done, and I didn't do it. But my mantra is always, I'd rather them be happy and me be unhappy than me be happy and them be unhappy, because they've hired me to do a job. But what I actually will do is I will, if doubt starts to seep in, I will hypercritically focus on something, and it doesn't make a difference. It could be the tile on that floor and what the corner, it doesn't make a difference, because if I hypercritically focus, I have no ability to think about the other stuff. And I will tell you that, and I don't know if you guys ever done this, but on the wheels, there are still times where just before a shot, I'll look down and I'll go, God, which way is up and which way is down? And then I'll go, I wonder how the corner of that tile is like, and then it starts and I go the right way, and I just have to mentally know that I'm going to do that. But yeah, there are times where I'm like, I can't tilt up right now.
Yeah.
There's no way if you said tilt up, I got a 50-50 shot at this.
Yeah.
And I've been doing this for how long, right?
For sure.
It's crazy.
I would be lying to you if I didn't do this every once in a while.
No, you do that every once in a while.
When
When it becomes a problem is when you're on the fluid head and you're like, I wonder which way goes left.
That would be a little different.
Then it's time to call it a day. But yeah, it happens to everyone all the time. And
Well,
imposter syndrome is completely real, because I will tell you, I've worked several times with Gary, and I'm like, I wonder when they're going to realize that Gary is better than I am.
That's not true.
Yeah. So, anyway.
Well, I think the other thing that I would like talk about off of that too is like that, like Do you get better as you've gone on about like having a short memory? Like, has that gotten better over the years?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Like a short memory about it?
Was a joke.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And Gary doesn't even recognize that it's
10-second Dave,
I think that answers
Dave
your
over
question.
there, yeah. You know what I mean, though? Because it's like, I feel like that way where, like, I used to work on Chicago Fire, and Lisa Wiegand was the DP, and she would hit the bell when it was time to move on.
Oh,
you know?
that's cool.
So every time they would go to ask her if she was ready, they would just ring the bell. And, like, to me, it became, like, this thing that kind of taught me to, like, forget it. You know? Because, like, you hear the bell, it's like, yeah, I could have done it better, but they're happy.
Oh, put it away and move on to the next challenge.
You know what I mean? Like, obviously, you're still going to kind of Monday morning quarterback yourself, but, like, over the years, has it been, like, easier to forget quicker? And I don't know, and I don't mean your memory.
No, I would say, I mean, everybody can answer, but I would say it's not easier. I don't think I ever forget. Like I said, the drive home is ugly, but I push it to the back of my life. I mean, not to go into a story, but I'll say very quickly, there was a massive shot I did years ago on West Wing that I completely screwed up, and everybody was angry at me. Wow. And I actually took about 5 minutes psyching myself into the fact that I could do it because I didn't think I could do it, and it was the only way I could. And I hypercritically focused on, I don't know, a curtain or something like that. But yeah, you have to push that out, I think, don't you think?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yes.
Anyone else?
Next question?
Yeah, sure. No,
I was just going to add to that the processing things when you feel like it didn't go the way you wanted to. I always have this little thing that I do, like after a shot is done, that I feel like we're moving on. I know we're going to be moving on. I just take a moment before I get off the dolly or whatever mode I'm in, and I just think about it for 20 seconds to a minute. What went wrong? What could have been better there? And how could I have made that better? And I just sort of put a mental note in my head so that the next time I'm in a similar type of situation, I can sort of learn from that. And I sort of learned through trial and error to do that. I come from kind of an athletics background, and that was something that I did then. And I started sort of applying a lot of things that I took from athletics, grafted over pretty well to operating. And that's helped me a lot to keep the sanity. And then you just let it go.
Because you're learning from it, right? It's not just a failure. It's like, oh, now I know how not to do that again.
It helps knowing that you're at least learning something that hopefully the next time you've got that in your toolkit, you know?
Well, I'm also curious if it's okay to break the format, just segueing into another question that's here, which is, do you guys watch dailies and how often? Because with all of that stuff too, the opposite end of it is I get so hyper-focused and critical about the minutia and get the perfectionism about it all. But so many times I've watched dailies and I'm like, I remember that sucking, you know, or I thought that looked like shit.
Totally.
But it looks great, you know, or it certainly looks more than acceptable, better than I thought at the time. And that's such a weird experience, but it's helped me in my confidence and also accept some of the imperfections that you feel are going on. But I'm curious if you guys have had the same experience, if you do watch dailies, if it gives you any good feedback like that. It's similar to athletes watching yourself perform after a game.
Stephanie?
I mean, watching dailies never makes me feel better. And it's very interesting to hear you guys because I keep thinking that it's just like, it must be my personality that it's hard for me to not see the mistakes only. And I'm actively working at like self-forgiveness and acceptance and reminding myself that like I was in an impossible situation sometimes, you know, when something goes wrong. But yeah, I mean, with enough distance, I can look at something I've done and been like, oh, it's better than I remembered. But yeah, watching dailies is like, it's like punishment.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I hate to say it, and I hate it. I don't watch dailies, but it's because my daily experience is literally like, oh, what was the password? And oh, it's
Yeah.
And 45 minutes later, it may actually. I can't deal with it.
Yeah.
I will say that I'm old enough that I do miss dearly going and watching dailies before. It was the most stressful, horrible experience, and is also wonderful because you learn so much. But that said, in all of this, what I will say is, if I do happen to watch dailies, it does happen occasionally for something, what I'll generally realize, which I think is along the line of what you're saying, is I was like a painter who was like right up next to the canvas, and I'm like, I can't believe I did that brushstroke. And then when I step back and I watch it, I'm like, all right, I hate that, but it's fine.
Sure.
And I think that's what you that's what you kind of want to be in any department, is you want to be like so perfect at everything that when you do make a mistake, nobody even realizes it.
Yeah, I've gotten better at forgiving myself for things because how many times have you had a DP come in or a director come in and they're like, that was great, and you're sitting there just beating yourself up like, oh my God, they touched the frame line when this happened or whatever.
Yeah.
And then you realize that they're not watching that stuff, you know? I mean, obviously you want it to be as technically perfect as you can make it, but at the end of the day, most of the people who are going to be watching this stuff, they're not looking at the technicalities of like the perfect operating. They're looking at the story, they're looking at the performance, and just it's always good to remind yourself at the end of the day, like, that's really what it's about. It's not really about you. It's not about your shot and your headroom and whatever. Nobody really gives a shit about that.
Yeah, I mean, unless you're a Steadicam operator, in which case it's completely about you, but that's another story for another time.
Nice.
I just found out that this is 15 minutes shorter than I thought, so
no.
we're actually almost done. So I'm going to make a shameless plug, and then I'm going to ask one final question. And then, by the way, anybody who wants, we're going to go out to the hallway, so if you want to ask questions, feel free, because this was just the format I came up with. So the op and the website and the podcast are called The Op. This is sort of a labor of love I started 9 months ago because honestly, I wish something like this existed when I was coming up. When I was starting as a Steadicam operator in day playing, you'd come in and actually people not only would not talk to you, but they would sabotage you sometimes. So I would like stand across the room and go, what is he doing? Wait, how is he doing? And you just had to like try to learn however you could. But I decided to put this together, most of which is not me. It's other operators and some of the best operators in the world. This format actually comes from something in there called The Answers, where every week I put out a question to about 40 operators. Between us, there are 500 years experience, and anybody who wants answers it, and you don't know who answered it. So you could just you could just go on and read answers to all these things. I would highly recommend, especially right now, checking out something called The Breakdown. There are always two of them on the front page, and actually the reason I mention it right now, it's where great operators, actually, I did one for the first time this week, so it's not a great operator this week, but it's really two great local key grips, Steve Mulcahy and Ed Titus, that I worked with, and we broke down a shot that we did for Dark Matter, and also Victor Macias and Eric LaSalle broke down an amazing shot they did for Chicago PD. So they're two Chicago things right on the front page. But the podcast is up, and it's chock full of good information. So I'm gonna ask you guys, I'm gonna answer this question first, because I don't want to be the last person, because it's my podcast and that's the rule I'm making, and that's the way it is. But I'm going to ask you the question, someone who's starting out, someone who's, actually no, I'm going to lie, I am going to be the last person because I don't want to steal your thunder. All the podcasts end with this question. Someone who's starting out, you 20 years ago, what is your recipe for success? What is the piece of advice you would give to someone to succeed? And the only reason, by the way, I'm going last is because since I ask every podcast person this, I have a bunch of this stored, so I'm going to throw it out to you. Stephanie?
I think, I guess it's a little bit like what I wish I'd known when I first started. Also would be the advice I would give is just like keep your head up and keep going, because it's ups and downs, regardless. It's ups and downs. It's a creative job, it's a technical job, it's a political job, and there's lots of elements and aspects that will influence every day that you work as a camera operator, and some days are good, some days are bad, but keep your head up and accept and know that there are ups and downs.
This might sound super motivational speaker, but mine would just be that, you know, you do have to believe in yourself and believe that you can do basically any job that anybody else is doing in this business. 18 years ago, I think, is when I got in as a grip on Prison Break. I remember watching the operators on that and thinking like, damn, feeling like that was so far away from anything I'd ever be involved in. But it's not true. You know, you really can't do any job, any particular job that you want to do. So you do have to believe in yourself and just keep pushing along, and that's it.
That's great advice. It's funny, I don't think I would have said this 10 years ago, but I think for me, honestly, just being humble is actually a really important skill to have as an operator, because it's very easy as an operator to not be humble, because you're kind of in the middle of it. A lot of people are asking you questions and looking to you for, information, because you often have more information because you're close to the DPs and the directors. Yeah, I think being humble is important, and knowing that it's not really about you, it's not about your shot. It's kind of like there's a bigger picture thing that's happening, and always kind of keeping sight of that, I think, is really important. And also just, I've learned over the last probably 5 or 6 years particularly to try to always bring like sort of a beginner's mind. I've learned that the hard way through like sort of not working well once with a DP, and that was a bad experience. But I think on the flip side, what I got out of that is I realized that I was too rigid in what I thought it needed to be, how I thought the shot needed to go, instead of just being open. So that's another thing. Just being really open, having a beginner's mind every time there's a new shot. Like, oh, this is cool. Like, I like the idea. Let's try it. Even if you got some technical questions, but you can iron that all out. You know what I mean? You'll figure out a way. And that's the art of operating, is taking an idea that doesn't really work and making it work. So yeah, I think having a beginner's mind is really important.
I kind of answer the same question, or this question, the same way every time. So I'll try to do a little bit different this time. I think for me, like just with anything in a more broader spectrum, just outside of camera operating and any position really in filmmaking, is just constantly do the work. Just keep trying to get better. I think that's really in any job, really. It's just learn something new every day, and if you can't do that, get better at something you already knew. I don't know if there's anything else to do, really. And the other thing I would say too is that it's kind of goes with the humble thing, but it's like, but don't be afraid to tell people what you want to do. I think that that's something that is scary and hard, and people think that they don't. It's kind of ridiculous for you to tell a DP that I want to be a DP too, and it's like, sure, but people should know what you're trying to get to, because there are people out there that will see something in you and help you, and you want those people to be in the position to do that. So I think that's a really big part of it.
Yeah, I'll end it off with number one, homemade baked goods never hurt anybody. Bribing people is fantastic. Don't overlook that. Be a nice person. I know that seems really simple, but if we need an AC tomorrow and they bring me 5 people and 2 of them annoy the crap out of me, I don't care if they're the best. I want to be around someone nice and enjoyable all day. And I think the biggest thing that I've come to realize is, like, you gotta love this business. And it doesn't make a difference. It's not an operator, gaffer, whatever, key or whatever. You have to love what you do to do this, because there are much easier jobs out there. So I would just say, don't ever lose the passion for it. And I will say, I've been doing this for 35 years, and it's not the job that it was, but I keep on reinventing what I love about it. And it's still the greatest job in the world as far as I'm concerned. And I've done other jobs and I don't want to do them. I want to be a camera operator because it's just the best job that I can think of. So yeah, love what you do and keep that fire burning is what I would say. And check out the app. All right, well, thank you very much. Thanks for being here. This was fantastic.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Stopped recording 20 minutes ago. Yeah, no.
Oh.
I thought it was an hour. Anyway, that was great. Did you guys?